Have you ever wondered why it feels like everyone around you is surrounded by a crowd of friends, while you stand alone in a corner, disconnected from it all? It's a feeling that can easily pierce through the heart, leaving you questioning your worth, your purpose, or even God's plan for your life. Why does it seem like everyone has someone, but I don't? You might ask yourself, especially in the quieter, lonely moments. I understand those moments. My wife and I have walked that very road, where, despite everything we had, we found ourselves wondering why our circle seemed so small, why we were alone. It was as if life was passing us by, and we were on the outside looking in. But as time passed, a truth began to dawn on us. This was no accident. This loneliness, this solitude, it wasn't something we had to simply endure. It was God's way of doing something magnificent in our lives. You see, there's a pattern in God's work that is easy to miss when you're caught in the thick of things. God often works in the quiet, hidden spaces, away from the noise of life. When He is preparing something extraordinary for you, He doesn't announce it with a loud fanfare. Instead, He takes you to the wilderness, where it's just you and Him. And I believe, like the sculptor chiseling away at a masterpiece, He removes all distractions to reveal His work in you. This truth was captured beautifully by C.S. Lewis, who once said, "All change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end." That mess, that seeming chaos, is the very work of God in your life. When it feels like everything around you is falling apart, know that God is laying the groundwork for something far greater than you could ever imagine. If you are in a season of isolation, if you feel like there is no one around to call friend, hear this: God is not abandoning you. He is not ignoring you. He is investing in you, preparing you for what's next. This period of loneliness is not punishment, it's preparation. I remember a time in my own life, on my 21st birthday, when I sat alone on a beach. My friends were out at a party, celebrating with laughter and joy. But I found myself wandering the shore, wrestling with questions I didn't have answers to. Why is my life like this? I asked God, feeling the sting of isolation. It seemed everyone else had a place, a group to belong to, and yet I was here, alone. But now, I see that it wasn't just a lonely night. It was a moment where God was doing something profound. He was pouring into me, preparing me for something far greater than I could see at that time. There's a powerful biblical truth that can often be overlooked in moments of solitude. God does not forget us. He never overlooks His people. Look at Jesus. Before He began His ministry, He spent 40 days in the wilderness, alone. It wasn't because God didn't care about Him. Quite the opposite. It was because God was preparing Him for the greatness that lay ahead. In the wilderness, when everything seemed silent, God was speaking. In those quiet times when you feel utterly alone, remember this: God is shaping you. He's preparing you for something bigger than your current understanding. If you feel the sting of loneliness today, it's not an accident. It's a sign that God is working behind the scenes to shape your future. As C.S. Lewis once wisely said, "Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." In those moments when we feel isolated, we often stand on the very foundation that God is laying for us. Welcome to C.S. Lewis. Here, you will discover the path to a deeper and more meaningful relationship with God. Let me assure you, you are not forgotten. You are chosen. The loneliness you feel today, it's not to harm you. It's part of God's bigger plan, a plan that you may not yet understand, but one that is filled with great promise. And in those moments when you feel like your world is shrinking, remember that sometimes, when God calls you to something extraordinary, your circle will shrink too. Your friends will fade away, not because you've done something wrong, but because God is protecting your calling. Think about Jesus. He had many followers, but only 12 disciples. Even then, one of them betrayed him. Why? Because God often allows people to fall away to keep us focused on our mission. And just like Jesus, you too have a calling. When God is working in your life, your circle will get smaller, but your purpose will get clearer. The loneliness you feel, the quiet moments that seem to stretch on without end, these are not just gaps in your life. They are not empty spaces that God has overlooked. No, these moments of solitude are invitations. They are a calling to something greater. And though it may feel like you're drifting in a sea of silence, there is more happening beneath the surface than you can possibly understand right now. Think of the story of Moses. For 40 years, after fleeing Egypt, Moses lived as a shepherd in the wilderness. For 4 decades, he was alone with his thoughts, his prayers, his dreams. Imagine what it must have been like, standing in the wilderness, with only the wind and the distant call of animals for company. It must have felt like life had passed him by. But in reality, it was the exact opposite. God wasn't leaving Moses behind. He was preparing him. He was refining him for the monumental task that lay ahead. The wilderness wasn't wasted time. It was a season of preparation. And while Moses might not have understood it in the moment, he was being prepared to lead a nation out of slavery. How many times do we look at the dry and barren seasons of our own lives and wonder if we're stuck in a never-ending loop? But let me remind you, God is not wasting your time. He is shaping you, and in due season, you will see that the loneliness you've felt was only the beginning of something magnificent. C.S. Lewis understood the weight of these moments. He wrote, "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream. When God is preparing us, there is no age limit, no expiration date. It doesn't matter how long the season of isolation lasts. What matters is that God is preparing you to fulfill the calling He has placed on your life." I think back to those quiet nights I spent wondering why I wasn't surrounded by friends, why life felt like it had come to a standstill. But in those moments, God was working in ways I couldn't see. He was drawing me closer to Him, showing me things that would have been impossible to learn in the noise of the world. As C.S. Lewis so eloquently put it, we are what we believe we are. When we believe that God is working in us, even in the silence, our perspective shifts, and we begin to see that the loneliness is not an obstacle, but an opportunity. The Bible offers us comfort during these times. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Isn't it a beautiful thought? In the deepest moments of loneliness, God is closest to us. While the world may turn its back, while friends may drift away, God remains. He is never absent, and He is never indifferent to your pain. He knows what you are going through, and He is using this time to do a deep and lasting work in your heart. When I think about isolation in the light of God's love, I remember the example of Jesus. Even when He was surrounded by people, He would often withdraw to the solitude of the mountains or the quiet of a garden. He understood the importance of time alone with God. It was in those moments of isolation that he found the strength and clarity he needed to fulfill his mission. Easy to fall into the trap of thinking that our worth is defined by the people around us. It's easy to think that if we don't have a large circle of friends, we must be doing something wrong. But God's economy is different. He doesn't look at the size of our circle. He looks at the state of our hearts. And sometimes, in his wisdom, he removes distractions and pulls us away from people who aren't aligned with his purpose for us. When you're feeling isolated, this can be a tough truth to swallow. It can feel like rejection. But let me assure you, it is not rejection. It is protection. As C.S. Lewis said, we are what we believe we are. When you believe that your loneliness is a preparation, you can rest in the knowledge that God is working things together for your good. He is clearing the path for you to walk in your purpose, and He's protecting you from relationships and situations that could lead you off course. I remember feeling confused, asking myself, why are so many people moving on with their lives while I'm stuck here? But with each passing day, I began to see that God was doing something in my life that required a quiet space. He was cultivating something within me that would later bear fruit in ways I couldn't have imagined. Jesus, too, was prepared in the wilderness. In Matthew 4:1-2, it says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry." It's interesting that, after spending all that time alone, in the silence, Jesus was ready to confront the enemy. In those 40 days, he grew spiritually, strengthened by the quiet moments of solitude. When you are alone, God isn't abandoning you. He is preparing you, refining you, and building your inner strength for what lies ahead. In your moments of loneliness, remember that you are not alone. God is working in you, shaping you, and preparing you for something greater. As C.S. Lewis once wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That's what God is doing in you. He is transforming you, making you ready for the incredible journey He has set before you. In the fast-paced world we live in, silence is often seen as something to be avoided. We fill our days with noise, whether it's the hum of the television, the chatter of social media, or the never-ending demands of our work and responsibilities. We often view silence as uncomfortable or even unnerving. But when we turn our eyes to God's work, we see that silence is not something to fear. It's something to embrace. Think of the story of Elijah. In 1 Kings 19, after facing great opposition and running for his life, Elijah found himself alone in the wilderness. He was exhausted, desperate, and wondering if his life had any meaning at all. And then in the stillness of the moment, God spoke to him, not in the thunder, the wind, or the fire, but in a gentle whisper. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire came a gentle whisper, 1 Kings 19:12. This passage is a powerful reminder that sometimes, when we're in the midst of our struggles, God's voice is not always loud and booming. It's often in the quiet moments, the times when we think nothing is happening, that God is closest to us. In those moments of isolation, when everything seems to be still, God is at work, preparing us for what's to come. I know how easy it is to feel frustrated when you're in a season of silence. You look around and see others thriving, surrounded by friends, success, and activity, and you wonder, why am I stuck here, in this stillness? But let me assure you, it's not a punishment. It's God's way of drawing you closer to Him. He's using the silence to speak to your heart in ways that are impossible when we're distracted by the noise of life. C.S. Lewis wrote, "We do not want to be merely happy. We want to be worthy of happiness." This statement speaks volumes about the importance of reflection and self-examination. When we are caught up in the whirlwind of life, we rarely have time to reflect on our true purpose. But in the silence, God invites us to look inward. He invites us to grow, to understand who we are, and to discover who He is calling us to be. Jesus, too, understood the value of silence. Often, He withdrew from the crowds to spend time alone with His Father. In the Gospel of Mark it says, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house and went off to a solitary place, where He prayed." Mark 1:35. Even though He was surrounded by people who needed Him, Jesus recognized the importance of solitude, of being alone with God. He needed those quiet moments to recharge, to listen, and to prepare for what was next. We, too, need those moments of stillness. They are not a waste of time. They are the moments where God does His deepest work in our lives. When we're alone, when everything is quiet, we can hear the whispers of God's voice. We can hear Him calling us to something greater. But here's the thing. Silence doesn't always feel comfortable. It's easy to run from it. It's easy to fill the space with distractions so that we don't have to face the discomfort. But if we learn to lean into the silence, we begin to hear God more clearly. We begin to see His purpose for us more clearly. And slowly, the isolation we once feared becomes a sacred space, a holy ground where God shapes us into who He wants us to be. As you find yourself in these quiet moments, remember that God is never far from you. He is close, even in the silence. He is doing a deep and lasting work in your heart, even if you can't see it yet. C.S. Lewis once said, "You can make anything by writing." In the same way, God is writing your story, one chapter at a time. And sometimes, those chapters require silence, moments when God is crafting something beautiful in you. Let me share something deeply personal. In those moments of silence, I found myself questioning God's plan. I would sit in the quiet, wondering why things weren't moving, why I wasn't surrounded by people who understood me. But as time went on, I began to see that God was not ignoring me. He was protecting me, guiding me, and preparing me for what lay ahead. The silence was not an absence of God. It was His invitation to grow, to listen, and to become who He had called me to be. This period of isolation isn't something you should try to escape from. It's a gift, a time for you to grow deeper in your relationship with God, to reflect and to listen. God speaks in the silence, and when you learn to embrace it, you'll find that the noise of the world grows quieter, and the voice of God becomes louder. It's easy to confuse loneliness with a sense of being abandoned. It's easy to assume that if we are lonely, it means we are unworthy, or that something is wrong with us. After all, don't we all want to be surrounded by friends, by people who care, who will walk with us through life? It can feel like everyone else has it together, their lives full of joy and companionship, while we remain on the outskirts. But here's the truth I've learned over the years. Loneliness is not the absence of purpose. It's the beginning of it. Think about the story of John the Baptist. Before he began his public ministry, he spent years in the wilderness, living in isolation, preparing for the calling that lay ahead. The wilderness was not a punishment. It was a preparation. It was in the solitude that God shaped him, refined him, and made him ready to fulfill his mission. And when his time came, John stood boldly, declaring the coming of the Messiah, with a clarity and strength that could only have come from those quiet moments alone with God. When we look at the lives of people who have changed the world, whether they are spiritual leaders, inventors, or artists, we often forget that many of them spent significant portions of their lives in solitude, grappling with their thoughts, their calling, and their place in the world. It is in these quiet moments that God does his most profound work in us. And just like John, or like Moses in the desert, or like Jesus in the wilderness, your period of isolation is not wasted. It's the foundation for the extraordinary work God has planned for you. C.S. Lewis once said, "The greatest of all illusions is that we are alone." When we feel isolated, we often believe the lie that we are abandoned, that no one understands us. But God's word tells a different story. In Psalm 25:16-17, David cries out, "Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. The troubles of my heart have multiplied. Free me from my anguish." David was a man who knew what it was like to feel alone, but he also knew that God was his refuge. In those moments of loneliness, David didn't turn away from God. He turned toward him. He understood that loneliness was not an indication of God's absence, but a call to draw closer to him. When you're walking through loneliness, it can be easy to let your mind drift to thoughts of bitterness or doubt. You may wonder why God hasn't brought the right people into your life, or why things aren't moving the way you imagined. But in those moments, I encourage you to remember this truth. God is not absent from your pain. He is present, He is working, and He is preparing you for what's next. Loneliness, when viewed through the lens of faith, becomes the soil in which your purpose takes root. You may be wondering how loneliness can ever serve a greater purpose. How can being alone, seemingly left behind, possibly be part of God's good plan? The answer lies in the deep work that God is doing inside you. When you have no one else to rely on, you have no choice but to lean fully on God. It is in these seasons that you learn to hear His voice more clearly, to trust Him more deeply, and to depend on Him for everything. You begin to see that the world around you is full of distractions, and that true fulfillment comes not from human companionship, but from God's presence. Look at the example of Jesus. Even in His darkest hour, when His disciples slept in the Garden of Gethsemane, and He faced the weight of the world's sin upon His shoulders, Jesus leaned into God. He cried out to His Father, knowing that He was never truly alone. And God, in His perfect timing, sent angels to strengthen Him. Luke 22:43. In His isolation, Jesus found His strength, not in the approval or comfort of others, but in the quiet communion with His Father. In the same way, when you find yourself in isolation, you can know that you are not truly alone. God is with you. He is walking beside you, even when it feels like the world has turned away. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "We are not made for happiness. We are made for God." True fulfillment doesn't come from the number of friends we have, the popularity we enjoy, or the approval we seek from others. True fulfillment comes from God alone. And when you're in a season of loneliness, God is inviting you to turn your eyes to Him, to find your joy, and to discover the depth of His love and presence. in a way you might not have otherwise. So, what do we do in these moments of loneliness? First, we turn to God. Pour out your heart to Him. Tell Him how you feel. He is not afraid of your honesty. Second, immerse yourself in His Word. Let His promises fill you. Let His truth anchor your soul. Psalm 68:6 says, God sets the lonely in families. While God may be isolating you for a time, He is also preparing you for the right relationships, the right community. Trust that He is doing a good work in you, even when you don't see the results immediately. Finally, learn to embrace the gift of solitude. It's not an empty space. It's a sacred space where God can do His deepest work in you. Just like the plants need a quiet time to grow and root deeply in the soil, so too do we need these quiet seasons to grow and strengthen in our faith. In a world filled with distractions, we often struggle to find moments of stillness. Whether it's the constant buzz of notifications, the overwhelming demands of work and relationships, or the pressure to always be doing something, it's easy to lose sight of the beauty that solitude offers. We are often taught to avoid solitude, to seek connection and interaction, but in doing so, we may be overlooking one of the most precious gifts God can give us, the ability to be alone with Him. Think of Jesus once again. When He began His ministry, He withdrew to the wilderness, where He spent 40 days fasting and praying. He didn't seek the approval of the crowds or try to gather people around Him. Instead, He took the time to listen to the Father's voice, to understand His mission, and to find strength in the solitude. It was in those moments that He grew in wisdom, in prayer, and in purpose. And when He came out of the wilderness, He was ready to fulfill His calling. We too must learn to embrace solitude as a gift, rather than something to fear or avoid. It's in the quiet moments that God often speaks to us most clearly. It's when we're alone with our thoughts, with our emotions, and with God, that we begin to understand more deeply the work He is doing in our lives. We begin to hear His voice above the noise of the world, and in doing so, we grow closer to Him. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "The more you know the world, the more you will be alone in it. But that will make you more human, not less." Solitude has the power to deepen our understanding of the world and our place in it. It's in these moments of quiet reflection that we come to terms with our fears, our doubts, and our desires. It's in the stillness that God can reveal His heart to us, and in turn, we can begin to understand our own hearts better. But solitude isn't just about reflection. It's also a time for growth. Just as a tree needs time in the soil to take root, we need time alone with God to grow spiritually. When we're constantly surrounded by the noise and distractions of the world, it's easy to forget the work that God is doing inside us. But when we embrace solitude, we give ourselves the opportunity to grow deeper in our faith, to hear God's calling more clearly, and to prepare ourselves for the mission He has set before us. Solitude is where God shapes our character. It's where He refines our hearts and teaches us to depend on Him. We learn to listen more attentively, to trust more fully, and to follow His lead more faithfully. And in the process, we are transformed into the people He has called us to be. When I think of solitude, I also think of the many biblical figures who experienced periods of being alone, yet were used by God in extraordinary ways. Think of Joseph, who spent years in prison before being elevated to a position of power in Egypt. He could have seen his time in isolation as wasted, but instead, he allowed it to refine him. He learned to trust in God, to wait on His timing, and to prepare for the moment when he would be called to fulfill his purpose. The same can be said of the Apostle Paul. Before he became one of the most influential figures in Christian history, Paul spent several years in isolation after his conversion, learning, praying, and growing in his understanding of God's Word. During this time, God shaped him, preparing him for the great work that lay ahead. It was in these quiet, often painful seasons that Paul was able to grow into the man who would go on to write much of the New Testament and spread the message of Christ to the world. These stories remind us that periods of solitude are not signs of failure or abandonment. Rather, they are periods of preparation. They are seasons when God works in our hearts and minds, shaping us for the purpose He has in store. And though we may not always understand the purpose of our isolation in the moment, we can trust that God is at work. He is preparing us for something greater than we can imagine. As C.S. Lewis once wrote, "The Christian way is different, harder and easier. Christ says, 'Give me all.' I don't want so much of your time and so much of your money and so much of your work. I want you. In solitude, we give God all of ourselves, our fears, and in return, He gives us the opportunity to grow into the person He has created us to be. There will be times when solitude feels uncomfortable, when we are tempted to fill the silence with distractions or to rush through it in search of something else. But I encourage you to embrace those moments, to allow God to speak into the quiet spaces of your life. Trust that He is working in you, shaping you, and preparing you for the extraordinary work He has planned for you. When you are in a season of solitude, it's easy to feel like time is standing still. The world moves on around you. Friends are making progress in their lives. Others are achieving their dreams. And it can feel like you're stuck in the waiting room of life. But here's the truth I've come to understand. God's timing is perfect. And in the quiet moments of waiting, He is doing some of His most transformative work. Think about the story of Abraham. God had promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. But for many years, that promise seemed impossible. Abraham was old, and his wife Sarah was barren. For decades, they waited for God to fulfill His promise, and during that time, they faced doubts, struggles, and even moments of frustration. But in the end, God's promise was fulfilled in a way that only He could orchestrate. Isaac, their son, was born at the exact right moment, when it seemed like all hope was lost. In Genesis 21, first Sarah, it says, "Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as He had said. And the Lord did for Sarah what He had promised." God's timing was never off. It wasn't delayed. It was simply waiting for the perfect moment. And just like Abraham and Sarah, we must learn to trust that God is working even in the waiting. He is never late. He is always right on time. This truth is a challenge, isn't it? We live in a world where everything is on demand. Whether it's our favorite show, our food, or our social media posts, we are conditioned to expect immediate results. So when we find ourselves in a season of solitude or waiting, it can feel frustrating. We want answers now. We want to see the results of our faith, our hard work, and our prayers. But God doesn't work on our timetable. He works on His, and His is always perfect. C.S. Lewis captured this idea when he said, "God will not love us unless we accept that He is the one who sets the terms." The terms are quite simple, but they are utterly different from those we would like. The terms of God's timing may not match our desires, but they are always for our good. When we accept that His timing is best, we can rest in the assurance that He is working even when we can't see it. In my own life, I've spent seasons waiting. I've questioned why things weren't moving as I hoped, and I've struggled with the feeling that I was being left behind. But over time, I began to realize that those seasons of waiting weren't wasted. In fact, they were crucial to my growth. While I thought nothing was happening, God was quietly working behind the scenes, preparing me for what was to come. He was teaching me patience, resilience, and trust, and He was strengthening my faith. God doesn't just leave us alone in our waiting. He doesn't abandon us when things seem still. Instead, He walks beside us, patiently guiding us through the process. In Isaiah 40:31, we are reminded, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." When we place our trust in God's timing, we are promised that our strength will be renewed. The waiting is not in vain. It's a time of preparation, a time when God is fortifying us for the future He has prepared. In those quiet seasons, we must learn to lean into God, to find strength in His presence. I know it's easy to get caught up in the fear of missing out, to look at others and wonder why they seem to be progressing while we are standing still. But God's plan for you is unique. His timing for your life is tailored to your purpose. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. And you are not waiting in vain. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "We are all fallen creatures and all very hard to live with. But here's the thing, God knows that about us. He knows our doubts, our impatience, and our struggles. And yet He chooses to work in us, to shape us, and to prepare us for something greater. God's timing isn't about punishing us or making us wait just for the sake of waiting. It's about preparing us, refining us, and setting us up for the extraordinary work He has in store for us." The Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans 8:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Even in the waiting, God is working. Even in the loneliness, God is working. Even in the times when it seems like nothing is happening, God is orchestrating every detail of your life for His glory and for your good. You may not understand the timing right now. You may feel like you're on the sidelines, waiting for your moment to come. But know this, the waiting is not wasted. It is part of God's perfect plan. And when the time is right, He will reveal to you the purpose behind every moment, every season of solitude, and every trial. You will see that it was all part of His beautiful design. As we draw this journey to a close, I want to reflect on one final, yet profound truth. The seasons of solitude and waiting, the times when it feels like nothing is happening, these are the moments where God is doing His most beautiful work in us. We often look at these times with frustration, longing for a faster path, a clearer direction, or a more visible outcome. But in reality, the journey of becoming is a slow, deliberate process that God uses to mold us into the people He created us to be. It's easy to view the challenges, the loneliness, and the waiting as obstacles to our happiness or success. But when we shift our perspective, we begin to see that these are actually opportunities. They are moments when God is refining us, purifying us, and preparing us for the extraordinary calling He has placed on our lives. C.S. Lewis once said, "The process of becoming is a continual work, sometimes painful, but always purposeful. Our growth, our transformation, and our ultimate calling are shaped in these quiet, sometimes difficult moments." I think about the seasons in my own life when I questioned what God was doing. Hush. I spent many moments in frustration, asking why things weren't progressing as I had hoped. But looking back, I can see that every lonely night, every season of waiting, and every moment of silence were part of a greater story. Those were the moments when God was forming me. He was shaping my character, refining my faith, and building the foundation for everything that would come after. And in the end, I can say with confidence that I wouldn't be who I am today without those seasons of becoming. Jesus understood this process better than anyone. His life on earth was one of constant transformation, both for himself and for those he encountered. From the moment he was born in a humble manger, to the quiet years spent growing in wisdom and grace, to the intense moments of solitude in the wilderness, Jesus was constantly being prepared for his ultimate purpose. The world might have looked at him during those silent years and seen someone who was insignificant, but in reality, God was laying the groundwork for the Savior of the world. In the same way, God is at work in you, even when it feels like you're waiting, even when it feels like you're alone. You may not see the results of your struggles and prayers right now, but trust me, they are not in vain. As C.S. Lewis so wisely put it, you are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream. It's never too late to grow, to change, or to become more who God has called you to be. The work that God is doing in you today is preparing you for something magnificent tomorrow. Throughout the Bible, we see this pattern. God often uses seasons of solitude, struggle, and isolation to prepare his people for something greater. Think of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers and spent years in prison before rising to power in Egypt. Or think of Moses, who spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading the Israelites out of Egypt. These men didn't understand the purpose of their struggles in the moment, but looking back, they could see that each challenge, each trial was part of God's perfect plan. And so it is with you. Whatever season you are in, whether it's one of loneliness, waiting, or isolation, know that God is not wasting your time. He is shaping you, preparing you, and molding you into the person he has called you to be. This process may not always be easy, but it is always purposeful. Trust that God's timing is perfect, and that every season of your life is part of a greater story. God's work in you is not about what you can see now. It's about what he is preparing you for. Trust the process, and know that in his perfect timing, you will see the beauty of becoming the person he has always intended you to be. Before we close, let me leave you with this final encouragement. Even in the seasons of loneliness, God is working. Even in the quiet moments, he is present. Even in the waiting, he is preparing you for something extraordinary. Keep trusting, keep growing, and keep believing that God is doing something magnificent in your life. The beauty of becoming is a slow and steady process, but one that will bear fruit in ways you never expected. As we finish this journey, I encourage you to reflect on the lessons learned. Embrace the quiet seasons, trust God's timing, and remember, you are not alone. You are chosen, and God is shaping you for something magnificent. May you continue to walk in faith, knowing that every moment, even the lonely ones, is part of his perfect plan for your life. Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth. We hope this message has encouraged you to lean into God's presence and trust that he is working behind the scenes. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments and let us know how this message has impacted you. If you'd like to continue on this journey with us, don't forget to subscribe to the C.S. Lewis channel for more inspiring and uplifting messages.